good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Live podcast of Discovery Fellowship Church. My name is Pastor Nathan. Have I ever said that my name is Pastor Nathan on this?
You normally say, I'm your host, Pastor Nathan.
I'm your host,
Here's
Pastor Nathan. Here's my co-host, Pastor Matt.
Hey, guys, it's me.
And we are in for a fun episode today. But before we jump into that, as always, don't forget, if you have not done so already, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you have downloaded this. And you can be a part of the podcast by emailing podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com. Now, we are in a hurry today, so I'm going to be talking really fast because we don't have as much time. It's a busy week, but we wanted to make sure we still got an episode live. So, Matt, we are going to jump right into the news.
Sweet.
The Olympic controversy continues.
Every day.
Every day. We watched a little bit of it last night.
Oh, congratulations.
The speed climbing. Have you seen the speed climbing?
I haven't watched any climbing yet. I'm still waiting for breaking to start. It starts like tomorrow, or it starts the day this is released, I think. So that's exciting.
Yeah. The breaking sounds fun. The speed climbing, it's like a straight wall.
Yeah.
And it's up like two or three stories.
They climb it fast.
About 4 seconds, 4.5 seconds. I don't, it looks like Spider-Man just
like,
running up a wall.
What's the point though? Because I've done rock climbing. I've done like rock wall climbing, the fake ones, but I've also done real ones. And it's part of the fun is actually like going through the journey and taking your time through it. And like,
well, that's, so you can watch the
speed
other,
climbing is just,
the other rock climbing is that. They're like,
it's crazy.
Feeling and trying, and they're like upside down, hanging up by just like their fingertips.
It's like going to Disney World,
amazing.
Waiting 2.5 hours in line for a ride like Tron that lasts 14 seconds.
Right.
And it's like, what was the point?
For that brief
little rush. And so you watch these guys just run up a vertical wall.
No, for the guy doing it, it's for that brief little rush.
But you watched it.
It
like,
was
what's
cool
your
to
rush
watch.
in watching it?
Well, because I didn't have to wait 2 hours.
Because it's like real life Spider-Man.
It was like just incredible to see somebody run up a wall, essentially.
Yeah. Is it like an American Ninja Warrior when they do the wall at the very end?
It was cooler than that.
Cooler. Wow.
Watch the speed climbing.
Okay. I'll have to watch it. I'll get back to you next week.
But the one that I wanted to talk about real quick in our news today, I was reading an opinion piece on USA Today, which I was surprised that they, as a mainstream news outlet, let this opinion piece on, given all the things. But the controversy involves boxing.
Okay.
The headline of this opinion piece: Olympic boxers deserve compassion, but questions of fairness shouldn't be brushed aside. The fight over ensuring fairness in women's sports has become a major flashpoint in national politics. Now, the issue in question here was Italian boxer Angela Carini. She's Italian. Facing off against Algerian Imane Khelif last week. She quit after 46 seconds, the Italian boxer, saying it isn't fair. Now, what was going on about that is the gender of the other boxers in question.
Right.
Now, a lot of people immediately jumped to, well, she's actually a man.
Right.
And then a lot of people immediately said no, because her passport and birth records are from Algeria, where they don't allow you to go with what you identify as. They just go biologically, and those don't say that. So jumping to her being a man was said to be unfair. Maybe this Italian woman just wasn't good.
Right. So there's actually two boxers in the Olympics.
Right.
I think the
Taiwan's Lin Yuting.
Yeah. They were both kicked out of IBA.
Right. The International Boxing Association. They were both disqualified from the Women's World Boxing Championships by the IBA after they reportedly failed a gender eligibility test.
Right. And IBA was banned as the official governing body of boxing for the Olympics, I think in the Tokyo ones, 2020, because of the way that they handle this regularly in their stuff. There's a lot of questions with not as many answers happening.
Right. So then this person goes on to say, it's important to note that Khelif and Lin do not identify as transgender. So what's going on in their situation is more nuanced than many are portraying, which of course, social media is not the place you go for nuance.
Right. So these boxers, they were born women. Like that was the gender assigned at birth, right? I mean, you said it was on their birth certificate.
Yes. So here's All right, so let me read a little bit more of this, and then let's see what you think.
Okay.
Because this goes into some of that.
Okay.
All right, so the next heading says biology matters, especially in sports, which I feel like this is what we've all been saying for a long time, and it doesn't seem like that should be controversial, but apparently that's a very controversial thing to say. So both Khelif and Lin have additional matches this week. They are guaranteed medals, so expect the scrutiny to escalate. Thomas Bach, president of the Olympic Committee, called out the abuse and hate speech directed at the athletes as totally unacceptable. Yet, honest conversations and concerns over eligibility shouldn't be thrown into the same category as abuse. Simply raising these questions is not hatred. It's seeking a level playing field, which any athlete should understand is the ultimate goal. The fact that male and female competitions are separate imply an explicit understanding that gender differences matter. But it says it gets more complicated. For instance, if Khelif and Lin have XY chromosomes, as the IBA seems to suggest, then they are benefiting from more testosterone than other female athletes, and that's a fairness problem. An IOC spokesperson said they are women on their passports. It's not helpful to start stigmatizing this. But what matters is what their chromosomes say. Evolutionary biologist Carol Hooven, who left her teaching job at Harvard after being lambasted for speaking the truth about human biology, has written about how some individuals can have XY chromosomes, yet other development differences can make them being born with female appearing everything else.
Right.
And so to what you said, they were on their passports, birth certificates, whatever, in all ways might appear to be female. So this would be an instance of somebody who's not transgender, but maybe intersex.
Right.
Where you've got both chromosomes, but you look like only one. So what is the right answer at that point then?
Yeah, it seems like there has to be, I do agree with the opinion piece about the hate and abuse. That
Absolutely.
There's never a place for that, no matter how much you disagree with someone.
Absolutely.
And so I think for these people, if they, I mean, their whole lives, have they essentially been living their lives as women because that's what they were assigned at birth? Like, it seems like they have, I think the Algerian one has said, I am a woman. Like,
right.
I've been a woman my whole life. What's happening?
Like, is it possible, like, that when they did this test, that's the first time she even knew that this was happening?
It's possible.
Very possible.
Again, we don't know all the details of everything.
Right.
So the question of fairness, I think, does come into play. And, you know, controversial statement because I'm a conservative white male. And so everything I say is controversial or wrong because, you know, I have my privilege that I'm coming from. And so I say this thinking about, like, my kids or your kids, right? And I would want them to be put in a situation where basically all things are equal.
Right.
They all have the same equal opportunity.
Sure.
And I know we've been fighting for women's rights and equality for many years. And I love that for 99.9% of the situation. Like,
sure.
Men and women are different, but equal.
Yes.
Same value, same worth, same creation by God as sons and daughters of his, right? Like, we are all created in his image equally. There's value and there's worth because of that. But he also created us very different with different roles to fulfill. And I know that's controversial too, that we might have different roles, different body types, different heart bents, right? For the majority of men and women, we're very different. And that is a beautiful thing. And for us to, when we try to blur those lines any direction, it causes friction. It causes, because we're going against creation. We're going against design.
Right.
Now, for these two people, they had some sort of difference that happened in their birth that wasn't their choice, wasn't their fault.
Right.
So yeah, the question comes up, then what do we do with that?
Right. So I think, you've got, unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of different things happening. And again, nuance is not something that the internet does well.
What?
I think if all of a sudden I said, I'm going to go compete in a women's competition because if I were to go out and look at my best weightlifting or something like that. I'm not very strong, but let's say I was, and I would be like, wow, I could do pretty good in a women's competition. Not because women are worse, but in general, men have more upper body.
We're
strength.
designed differently.
It's just biologically. Yeah. And I think the problem is if you take a difference and start to assign value to that, right? So if upper body strength, you are saying if you are stronger, you are better, then you could say, well, because men are stronger, men are better. But what we're not saying that strength is a qualitative better.
Right.
It's just a different thing.
Right.
Men are typically physically a little stronger. Although watching those rock climbers last night, no, they're all the female ones were a lot stronger than me. They had a lot more muscles.
Yeah, so what we're not saying that you and I as men are stronger than the women.
Than all women.
There are women who are stronger than you and I.
Yes.
Who can lift more, who can run faster, who can jump higher, who can climb a wall much
100%.
faster than we can, right?
100%.
What we're saying is, generally speaking, especially like, let's go with the weightlifting example you just said. Give me the strongest man.
Right.
And he will be stronger than any strongest woman, biologically speaking. Right. Just the way by design.
Yes. And so
that doesn't mean that one is worse than the other. Right. Right.
And so you could look at like the 10th strongest man.
Mm-hmm.
He could say, I don't want to be 10th place. I can still easily be first place in the women, claim to be a woman. And then what in this idea of like tolerance and acceptance, you've now said all the women who've been training and working at this are going to all lose because there's no way to compete with something like biology.
Well, there was this controversy with a swimmer recently, right, where born a man, swam in men's swimming for many, many years, wasn't good, was losing often, and then so decided to identify as, and I don't know this person's heart and situation,
sure,
but then at some point was identifying as a female, so started swimming in female competitions and dominated.
Right.
Like, so I go and play. I don't do this, but let's say I go and play men's basketball. Okay. And I just get worked.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fun for me and my pride and my ego. So I'm going to go play against 10-year-old girls.
Right.
I'm going to dominate.
Yeah.
Right. I'm twice as tall as them. I can
Right.
jump higher. Like, it's easier for me to win in that situation because biologically I am completely different than them.
Right. And so I think let's bring this all back around then. As Christians, as we're in a world where we can see, God has made us different, but equally valuable. And then we see what looks like a pretty controversial thing. I think the first thing, like you said, abuse is never a good thing. Like tearing people down, jumping to conclusions, saying like, well, this woman knew she was a man and she got into this because she wanted to beat up women. And like, I've seen people they're like, this is like a wife beater, like a abuser because it's a man who's beating women for fun. It's like, slow your roll a little.
Right.
Let's not jump to that. But what do you think in terms of like, as Christians, when we see things like this happening, how should we respond?
Yeah. So I think our first response needs to be compassion for every side, right? Both the Italian woman who was put in a situation where she said, I'd never been hit that hard in my life. I'm sorry. Like, you've worked your entire life to get to this point, and a couple punches and you're like, I have never been hit that hard in my life.
Right.
That stinks for you. And I have compassion for that. And then for this other person, the Algerian boxer, who, as far as I know, because again, I don't know this person's heart. I don't know where they've come from their entire life. I don't know if there's any deception. So from my angle, all of a sudden now the world hates you. Right. And is saying terrible things about you and thinking even worse things than they're saying about you. Right. When, as far as I know, this person
just liked to box,
found that they were good at it.
Thought they were fully a woman,
not knowing any different potentially, because I don't know. I haven't gone and gotten my chromosomes tested to see what is actually there. Right. Like, that's not something that we just do randomly. It's, the doctor said he was a boy, so he's a boy. Right. Like that. So I've grown up a boy my whole life because I have the boy body parts, and that's just what I assume is there.
Right.
And so for this person, as far as I know, they've been boxing because they found that they're good at it. They like doing it. Right. They're winning.
Right.
And they're boxing in the group that they've always been a part of. And so again, compassion towards that person, because holy cow, the scrutiny that they're under right now, both of these boxers, because of a potential, the chromosome differences that they potentially never even knew about. I feel for that.
Right.
From the sport perspective and the question of fairness that this article brought up, that's a whole bigger conversation that I can give my opinion on.
Sure.
And a lot of people probably aren't going to like it, but I would probably lean towards maybe you just don't box.
Right.
Like, unfortunately, I know you love it and I know you like it, but
right.
if biologically you're in a situation that puts you far and above any fair competition,
right.
Like, I want sport to be a fair competition because that's like the whole definition of sport, right?
So maybe it's you don't box, but then could they box in like the male? But that's maybe they're not quite up into that. They can box other people with the exact same genetic condition.
Right.
Only.
So what I assume is going to happen, I don't know where we are. I haven't followed it lately. I know the Algerian one made it to the gold medal round. I don't know about the Taiwan one.
Let's see if I can find on here.
And so, like, chances are it's going to end up being these two people boxing each other for gold and silver.
Well, if that...
Which, sure, that's great, but everyone that they beat on the way up to that point,
right?
They're for the rest of their lives, unfortunately, they're going to be looking back and being like, was this an unfair fight? Should I be the one who got gold?
Or
because I was put in a situation where they shouldn't have even been there in the first place. And it stinks for every party involved because there's no good solution to this.
I mean, I guess the first thing that they should have done maybe is, if they failed this other boxing thing, like, don't let them compete at the Olympics.
But the Olympics already banned the IBA.
But why?
And the Olympics does not do any sort of checking. They leave it up to the governing body of that sport. And if there's no governing body in place like boxing, because they haven't replaced the IBA for the Olympics, they leave it up to the country, which we already know how that's gone. Countries have been banned from sports several times over cheating in many different ways. And so leaving it up to countries whose pride is on the line and who have a history of bending the rules or cheating might not be the wisest decision by the IOC, but so it's the rules they have in place.
Okay, so yeah, like the swimmer, Leah Thomas, is that the one you were thinking of?
I think so, yeah.
Lost a legal battle. This was in June. Lost their legal battle challenging an effective ban on trans women competing in the Olympics. Okay. So she, however you need to refer to her, Leah wanted to compete in the Olympics. The Court of Arbitration for Sport dismissed the request for arbitration at the World Aquatics governing body.
Right. Right. That's the one that the Olympics have said, you're the governing body for this.
Okay. And sport. So they've decided that
that Leah cannot compete in women's sports.
Yeah. Now, I think the other last thing I want to say before we move on to like our main kind of topic is where it starts to hit a little bit closer is now we're seeing this trickle down. It's not just the Olympics, it's high schools, middle schools, where in our city and other cities, you are having this same thing happen. And most of the time the decision is, yeah, if you say you're a woman, you can compete in the women's sports, and maybe more of an issue, use the women's locker rooms.
Right.
And I think that's where it starts to get a little more close to home, a little more personal for this, where it's like, do you want your kid who's like, if you have a daughter who had worked really hard at something sportsy, I don't do sports, so whatever.
That was good. Neither
does my daughter. If my daughter was super, had been training for sports ball this whole time, and then just got immediately blown out,
right?
Because it was just some dude who then had to go into the locker room and change with all of them,
right?
Like that, I don't think would be okay.
No,
but it would be allowed right now,
right? So again, our controversial statement is: boys compete in boys' sports, girls compete in girls' sports. Boys change in boys' locker rooms, girls change in girls' locker rooms. Like, if you ask me how many genders there are, I'm going to say there's two: male and female. God created us male and female. That's it. There's two. I think there's two.
Here's where you'll get that controversial. They would say the same. Yeah, boys play in boys' sports, but this person is a boy because they said they are.
Yeah, I'm an elephant. I'm a purple hippopotamus.
Yeah.
None of that is just because I say something doesn't mean it's true. Like my heart and my mind are full of lies and deception because of sin in this world. And so just because someone says something doesn't make it true. Like we have to stop catering to the lies. And honestly, a lot of it's mental illness. And I know that's going to be a controversial statement too, but at this point, I don't care anymore. A lot of it is a mental illness that now doctors, teachers, like authorities in our world are just catering to and saying it's okay for you to think something that is absolutely ludicrous and not true.
Right. It's dysphoria, which we 100%. Do treat in other instances with other dysphoric thoughts. We treat them as something to help and help them get past. But in this one, we say we need to affirm it and celebrate it, which is very weird because like I think about like people with an eating disorder have dysphoria. An anorexic person looks in the mirror and thinks that they are heavier no matter how skinny they are. So that's the dysphoria, right? What they think doesn't match reality.
And as a doctor and a teacher, I'm not going to speak to that person and say, you're right, you are fat.
Let's go get you some liposuction.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's go throw up in the bathroom right now. Like, no.
You are going to try to help them get past that and get... So this is the thing that's always struck me as weird because it's like we've got the physical reality and we've got our mental thoughts about things. And when they don't match, the current thing right now is to say we need to try to do as much as we can to force the physical to match that mental. Right. But why not just do the other? Why don't we say, hey, let's try to work on the mental so that it corresponds to reality?
Yeah. When what I think doesn't line up with reality,
we don't try to change reality to match it.
I need to change my thinking because reality has proven something different. Right. No matter how much I want to speak it into existence, I am not a dolphin and I will not be able to swim or breathe like a dolphin does. Right.
Do you know can I tell you what's really funny about that example?
Yes, you may.
So the TV show South Park had a whole episode about this where and so what I love about South Park, I don't watch it all the time, but when I do, it's not afraid to say what it needs to say. And they had an episode, and this was years ago, like 10 years ago probably, where the little one of the kids was like, I want to be a basketball player. I identify as like a basketball player who's black, and so got surgery where they made him look black. And then his dad, this is what was funny, said, oh man, I've always wanted to be a dolphin. I feel like I'm a dolphin, and got surgery to make him a dolphin. So it's exactly what you just said. And they were just completely making fun of this whole concept through that. They've actually oftentimes kind of made fun of that. Again, South Park, equal opportunity offender. They will make fun of everybody.
Yeah. What I'm hearing between both of us talking is, as Christians, we need to stand for truth.
Yes.
The truth of who God made you to be, like how he designed you and who he made you to be.
Yep.
And so when there is that dysphoria, when there's that disconnect between my mental and the reality, the physical, then my job as a Christian is to love, have compassion, be filled with grace and mercy.
Right.
But speak the truth in the midst of it.
I love
Not continue to affirm lies. And so this is where it's super interesting, though, because we've had this conversation before. I don't know. Maybe this is our main topic today.
I think it is.
Sweet. We just made it up right now. Like in youth ministry in 2024, there's a lot of gender confusion amongst the youth. And so we've had students who've come in who identify as something different than what the gender they were assigned as birth.
Right.
And so
can I just say though, that phrase freaks me out. Like
gender
assigned. It wasn't assigned.
No, it was.
Shouldn't it be maybe gender recognized at
recognized?
Birth?
Yeah. Yeah. Different than what their parts say they are.
Different than what they are biologically.
There you go. Right. So a different gender identity that's happening.
Yes.
Some non-binary, some just opposite of what they were born, some wanting the they them, some wanting the Zers, the whatever that one's called. Like I don't know the exact. I know it starts with a Z though.
And somebody is spice.
Pumpkin spice. That was the weirdest video you've ever showed me in my entire life.
Neo pronouns. So they're the weirdest.
What I've often said is I'm not going to when you introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Jack. I was born Jill, but I'm Jack," right?
Perfect.
Okay. I'm not going to necessarily affirm that, right? And say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you were Jack."
Right.
That is so exciting. Like, welcome, Jack. This is great, Jack. That's fantastic. But I'm also not going to say, "No, you're not. You're Jill. You're not Jack. You're Jill. I'm going to call you Jill." Like, so where's this line as someone who I want to let you know that you're loved,
Right.
let you know that you're welcome, let you know that God has a plan for you. You're not living in it right now, but God has a plan for you. I want to make sure I'm not building a wall, right? We're building bridges.
Right.
How do I do that though without just lying to their face and without affirming the deception that they're living in?
Right. Now, there's a really good book on this that I've read by Preston Sprinkle.
Which we've talked about him, controversial.
Did talk about him. But he wrote a book called Embodied that is all about this as a Christian, what he has found. And it's, again, a pretty in-depth and nuanced look at all of this, which is like, have compassion, have concern, have, and then when it comes to how do you address them, he says it's kind of a conscience issue of you, because on the one hand, you don't want to affirm sin, and he talks about this. Everybody, he knows a lot of people who have come out of that and come to God. And a lot of them have said, "Oh yeah, when you reached out and you were kind to me, you used whatever weird pronouns I wanted that day, I never felt that you were condoning what I did. I just felt that you cared about me as a person."
Right.
And so in that sense, it's like, is it better to be right or be loving? And that's going to be a tough thing, because a lot of us want to just make sure we're right. Like, this is where my heart goes often. Unfortunately, it's like, I just want to be right. I don't care if it comes across as mean, because I'm right. Gosh darn it. Now, on the other hand, you could say, look, if I call you a she and I know you're a he, that's dishonest, and I don't want to lie. Right. And I'm convicted about lying by pretending you're something you're not. And I mean, maybe in that case, you're best, but to go over and be like, "Oh yeah, that's what he said," and like
overemphasize it, make it awkward. Yeah.
Like, what I don't have as much issue using a preferred name, because a name is a malleable thing anyway. We know that if you wanted to call me Nathan or N-Dog or Bubbly Scrubbles, like whatever, it's not going to be... that's not going to be like a lie or an untruth. If I say, "No, dude, call me Bubbly Scrubbles now," right? You're not going to lie. That's not a lie. That's not dishonest. If I ask you to call me that.
And the first time I meet you, if you say, "Hi, my name's Bubbly Scrubbles," you're be like, "That's weird, but okay, Bubbly Scrubbles."
Right.
That's the name you've introduced yourself to me as.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that if it is a conviction thing, it's like, well, then just be like, "Oh yeah, Jack over here."
Right. Call that person by their name instead of
just
by their
avoid
preferred
the pronouns.
pronoun. Yeah.
if it's a problem.
And I think that's where I've tried to be most often.
Sure.
Especially the last 5-6 years. I know it's kind of, there's always been the anomaly, but it seems to be more common, maybe even a little more, last 10 years or so, where I'll use the person's actual name as absolutely often as possible.
Right.
And if I'm talking to you about someone else, well, then they make sense. "Oh, did you see that they went to church last night?"
Oh, that's true.
Right. As right. Rather than me looking at you, that's what's the weirdest thing about pronouns is you're not going to talk to me.
Right.
And be like, "How's he feeling today?"
Right. No, pronouns define how we talk about others when they're not there. Right. And so that's the other part that kind of bugs me about the preferred pronouns thing.
Yeah.
No, it's like, if you are saying, when you say I'm a she, not a he, so what you are saying is, when I'm not around, I'm going to dictate how you refer to me. Yeah. And that's a little bit strange.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure people refer to me as things that I do not want them referring me as.
Right, but you are not the one.
I don't get to dictate that. That is your prerogative.
Other people talk about
you. Talk about me how you're going to talk about me. I just prefer you also speak to me that same way to my face, just so I know where we're at. You know what I'm saying?
Done.
Yeah. So all that to say, I think a lot of prayer needs to happen in our interactions with people. Ultimately, like my goal is I want you to know and love Jesus and follow him.
Right.
That's his goal too. Jesus' goal, right? He wants you to follow him. That's why he says it so many times in scripture. We talked about this last week in my sermon, where there's almost 30 times he either says, come to me or follow me in the New Testament. So like, it's an important thing. He doesn't, right, say, make sure that you have your pronouns right.
Right.
And then come follow me. He doesn't say, go and do this and then come follow me. He says, come and follow me. Right? I'm the one that's going to change your life.
Right. And so that's ultimately what.
Exactly. I want people to see me walk away from their interactions with me. And I know I suck at this most of the time, but every now and then, sometimes it's right. And I want them to see Jesus. Or I want them to at least want to see Jesus as a result of an interaction with me. Like, that's the hope and the goal as a Christ follower, is people see him, not me.
Right.
Right. It's that whole phrase, and we're actually going to talk about it this week in our sermon on Sunday morning. Awesome. About that phrase of shake off the dust of your, or be covered in the dust of your rabbi. Which comes from me being so close and following so closely and looking so much like my rabbi, my teacher, my Jesus, that I'm just covered in him, essentially. I love that. Right. And so let's be covered in Jesus. That's going to mean we have to spend a lot of time in prayer of how we respond to these types of situations. This is not the last time we're going to hear of a gender controversy in sports.
Right.
It's not the last time you're going to see or interact with somebody that might identify as something different than what you would think they are. And so let's approach that with the love and the grace and the acceptance that Jesus would have, not calling them to a life of following Jesus, but staying in their sin. A life of following Jesus and then leaving their sin behind and pursuing him.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, today's a little bit shorter of an episode. That's all the time we have for today. So we're going to wrap it up there. But again, please email us, podcast@dfchurch.com. We'll read your mails, comments, whatever. You can follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe, all the good stuff. And we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.